Hey, we're here to talk about some of my favorite riffs. All right, well, that was my take on one of my favorite riffs, Prince's Bambi. That's a tune from his self-titled record, and it's a really cool riff. Let's talk about it. I like it for a couple reasons. One, the tone is awesome. I don't even know how he did it, but it sounds like some kind of a fuzz, maybe like could be straight into the console. I'm not really sure, but it's like a really cool, gritty, kind of grainy, kind of screwed up sort of sound, which is really neat. So we have this TC honeypot fuzz doing the work for that, and then I threw some verb and delay on it to make me feel better about myself. But it's a cool riff. It's very kind of like Hendrix inspired. A lot of the sort of like thumb over the neck kind of vibe, that kind of thing. It's actually kind of a hard maneuver to do. And then this little chromatic octave move, which I love. That's almost like something from maybe like Fire or one of those old Hendrix tunes, you know? C sharp is such a satisfying key for power chords because you get that low open E string if you need it. And then the second part of the tune is a little different. There's these little bends that he plays. Yeah, that whole tune is just like a awesome kind of snapshot of like Prince's version of 70s rock, 70s funk rock. Obviously Prince was a huge Hendrix fan, so you hear a lot of that in that tune. And of course, I think he played all the instruments on it, which if you listen to it with that in mind, yeah, it just speaks to his genius. So that was Bambi. Cool. So that's another one of my favorite riffs. That's Who Knows by the Jimi Hendrix Experience, or actually, technically, Band of Gypsies. It is not a Jimi Hendrix Experience song. It is a Band of Gypsies song. Billy Cox and Buddy Miles were the rhythm section on that track. They did a live record. I think it was like New Year's Eve or something, 1969, maybe 1970, in Berkeley, California. And that's the first track on the record. It's like a 9-minute long jam over essentially that riff. And it's not a hard riff. It's the E, well, we're in E flat, even though I'm tuned to standard, so you can play it in E. You can play it in any key you want. But that's the way I play it. Maybe there's a different way to finger it or something, but it's just straight down the minor pentatonic scale, but with that flatted 5 for a little extra spice. And just, I think what's cool about it is that it's super simple, and when you play it with a really funky rhythm section, it's just a very effective type of riff. My trio will sort of find our way into that riff every now and then during certain parts of certain tunes. And then tone-wise, I threw on a bunch of stuff just because I think it sounds cool for the way that I play it. We use there's an octave, the sub and up octave, the helix phaser, some verb, and an overdrive. Jimmy's version is, Marshall straight, or a Strat straight into a Marshall, at 110 million watts of power. If you're playing it, just remember that there is sort of like a swung feel to it, which is helped by the way the guys play the backbeat. So there it is. Who Knows by the Band of Gypsies. Sweet. Okay, we're going to do some King's X today. It's like one of my favorite rock bands of the history of the world. That's a tune called Black the Sky. So they tuned, we just discovered, they're in C sharp, and then they go another whole step on the low E string, or the sixth string, I should say, down to B. So it's basically like what you would consider your typical drop D shapes. To kind of play this tune, but what I love about it is that it's heavy and funky at the same time, which is like two of my favorite things. I love how Ty uses this kind of minor 7 voicing. They have a lot of tunes that kind of Dogman or whatever. Then that part was always cool to me because I find myself kind of playing a lot of funk parts that sort of outline. You could think of it as like Mixolydian, but you could also kind of think of it as just like blues. It's just sort of like the funk scale. You know? So they use that little tail in the middle of the riff. So that's the verse of the tune. The intro is sort of a variation on that theme. So what's great about this riff for several reasons is the way it's sort of constructed with kind of like that question and answer. So there's like this big long question and then answers it in the top of the tune. Those guys were just have always been a huge influence on my sound and my writing and the way I approach riffs and then harmonies within those riffs. If you listen really closely to King's X music, you'll hear not just power chords, but there's all sorts of other colors in there as well, in the way that they construct their tunes. And then they stack these incredible, almost Beatles type vocal harmonies on top of everything just to give everything even more depth. So that's from their 5th record, Dogman, which is one of the heaviest albums ever made. So that was Black the Sky. Cool. So that was part of, almost all of, this great Stevie Wonder song called All Day Sucker, which Actually features the great Jeff Beck on guitar. It's just a funky, kind of rock and roll kind of riff. A lot of it is, if you listen to the original recording, is heavy on like a clavinet sound, which is always a favorite of mine. It's an A flat, and I like it because it kind of outlines some changes that aren't really being played by chords. It just sort of, the riff kind of hints at what the chords are. And it's just a fun riff to play. My trio plays it all the time. Yeah, I've got a little octave on here just for some fun. So it sort of outlines, you know, there's a 5 chord there. Right, and then the chorus has these really beautiful kind of 2-5-1 jazz changes. What's the melody? Right? So that's one of those riffs where you can kind of take a couple liberties about where you want to throw in the slides and the slithers and all those other kinds of things. But All Day Sucker, Stevie Wonder. Check it out. All right, that's a simple riff from Sing a Simple Song by Sly and the Family Stone. For whatever reason, a lot of great funk rock guitar riffs are sort of like in E. Probably just because E is a great key for guitar and the way that all the things kind of line up. What I like about this, it incorporates some cool little single note riff, and then it ties it all together with the nice 9th chord. So it's E minor pentatonic. So it takes a little bit of coordination to kind of switch from playing the single notes here on the low E string to getting into that chord. I'll do it with my pinky finger. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but because it sort of lines me up to play the top of that E 9th chord. And you don't really need to play the whole voicing. You can just kind of play the top 3 or 4 strings if you want. Maybe slide in the second and third time with the full chord if you want. Or another variation that I'll do is for that G to A move is actually play a whole chord. Play it, you know, nice major voicing. So play it like that. It's not the way that it is on the record, but you know, if you're playing it with your own band, you can kind of make it your own. A lot of great riffs and all that old Sly and the Family Stone stuff. So that was Sing a Simple Song.